You've seen 11:11 on the clock 3 times this week, and some part of your brain whispered that it means something. That quiet whisper has a name, a mechanism, and a history that stretches back further than any numerology tradition. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly why your brain locks onto number patterns and what that reflex actually reveals about how you process reality. The pattern you're noticing is real. The meaning you're assigning to it is built from something far more interesting than cosmic signals. Your brain processes roughly 11 million bits of sensory information per second. Your conscious mind handles about 50. That gap, the massive canyon between what you absorb and what you notice, is where numerology lives. Every hour, your eyes pass over hundreds of numbers: timestamps, license plates, receipts, phone screens, price tags. The overwhelming majority vanish without a trace, but when you see a number that already lives in your mental catalogue, something fires. Attention snaps. The number seems to glow. This is frequency illusion, sometimes called the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Once a number enters your awareness with emotional weight attached, your filtering system starts flagging it. You haven't suddenly started encountering 222 more often, you've started catching it. The appearances that don't match your pattern dissolve into background noise. The ones that do match get stamped with a feeling of significance. And that feeling is where things get genuinely interesting, because the emotional stamp comes first, the interpretation comes after. Think about the last time you glanced at a clock and saw a repeating number. The recognition was instant, almost physical. A tiny pulse of something. Meaning arrived before thought did. Your brain had already classified this as signal before your conscious mind even began constructing a story about why. Researchers studying pattern recognition have found that emotional tagging happens in milliseconds, far faster than any rational evaluation. The sensation of meaning is pre-verbal. You feel it in your chest before you think it in your head. This is the engine beneath every numerology system ever built. Pythagoras assigned mystical properties to numbers around 500 BCE. Chinese traditions linked specific digits to fortune and disaster. Kabbalistic gematria mapped Hebrew letters to numerical values and searched for hidden messages in scripture. These systems span thousands of years and dozens of cultures, and they all rely on the same cognitive machinery, a brain that is pathologically hungry for pattern. So why does pattern hunger exist at all? Because for most of human history, pattern detection was survival. The rustle in the grass that might be wind or might be a predator, the cloud formation that predicted rain, the berry color that separated food from poison. Missing a real pattern could kill you. Seeing a false pattern cost almost nothing. Evolution built a brain with the dial turned hard toward detection, even at the expense of accuracy. You are the descendant of people who flinched at shadows. The ones who didn't flinch didn't become ancestors. That survival wiring now operates in a world saturated with numbers. Digital clocks, transaction totals, follower counts, addresses, timestamps down to the millisecond. The raw material for pattern detection has exploded by orders of magnitude. But the detection system remains calibrated for a savanna with maybe a dozen important signals per day. The result is a brain scanning a fire hose of numerical data with a filter built for a trickle. False positives are inevitable, they're structural. But here's where most explanations stop and where the real story begins. Because numerology patterns don't just appear randomly, they cluster around emotional states. People report seeing angel numbers and repeating sequences most often during periods of uncertainty, transition, or heightened anxiety. Job changes, breakups, health scares, grief. The brain's pattern detection system doesn't operate at a constant sensitivity. Stress and uncertainty crank the dial higher. When you're anxious, your brain allocates more resources to scanning for signals. Ambiguous stimuli get classified as meaningful more readily. The threshold for what counts as a pattern drops. You start seeing confirmation everywhere because your threat detection system is working overtime, and it doesn't distinguish between a predator in the bushes and a repeating number on a receipt. The machinery is identical, the feeling of significance is identical, only the context has changed. This explains something that numerology believers and skeptics both tend to miss. The experience is real. The feeling of encountering a meaningful number is genuine, measurable, neurologically concrete. Dismissing someone's experience of angel numbers as pure nonsense ignores what's actually happening in their brain. Something is firing. Something is flagging that stimulus as important. The question worth asking is, important to whom? The universe or the unconscious mind? Consider what happens when someone assigns meaning to 444 appearing during a difficult week. They interpret it as a sign of protection or guidance. That interpretation produces a real emotional shift. Anxiety decreases. A sense of being supported emerges. Decision-making confidence increases. The number becomes an anchor, a cognitive landmark that organizes scattered emotional data into a coherent narrative. The brain craves narrative above almost everything else. A story, even one built on coincidence, is metabolically cheaper than sustained uncertainty. This is confirmation bias wearing spiritual clothing. And that framing might sound dismissive, but it reveals something worth sitting with. Confirmation bias is usually discussed as a flaw, a bug in rational thinking. In this context, though, it functions as emotional self-regulation. The person seeing meaningful numbers is, at the unconscious level, constructing a scaffold to manage overwhelming uncertainty. The scaffold works. People who find meaning in patterns during crisis often report lower anxiety and greater sense of agency. The mechanism is psychological, and the relief is tangible. Critics will point out, fairly, that this same mechanism makes people vulnerable to manipulation. Numerology-based scams, psychic hotlines, and algorithmic content that feeds pattern-seeking behavior all exploit this wiring. When someone charges $200 to decode your life path number, they're monetizing a cognitive reflex you can't turn off. The pattern hunger that once kept your ancestors alive now has a price tag attached to it by people who understand the mechanism better than you do. The tension between genuine emotional utility and exploitation potential sits at the center of this entire phenomenon. Your brain builds meaning from coincidence because meaning is cheaper than chaos. Numerology traditions persist across millennia because they provide frameworks that channel this meaning into structured systems. Those systems comfort people. They also create markets for people selling comfort. There's a test you can run on yourself. For 1 week, pick a completely arbitrary number. 37. Write it on a sticky note. Put the note where you'll see it every morning. By day 3, you will start encountering 37 with suspicious frequency. Receipts, timestamps, page numbers, license plates. You'll feel a small pulse each time, that same quiet whisper of significance. By day 5, you might catch yourself constructing a narrative about why 37 keeps appearing in your life. The number has no inherent meaning. You assigned it relevance, and your filtering system did the rest. That exercise reveals the mechanism stripped of all mystical framing. Your attention is a spotlight, and wherever you point it, the stage seems to light up on its own. The numbers were always there. Every number is always there. The act of noticing is the act of creating meaning, and your brain does this automatically, constantly, without asking permission. Where this gets genuinely uncomfortable is the recursive layer. Once you understand the mechanism, you might expect the feeling to disappear. It doesn't. Knowing that 1111 is a frequency illusion amplified by emotional state doesn't stop the small pulse when you see it. The pattern detection system operates below the level where knowledge lives. You can understand the illusion completely and still feel it completely. The two processes run on separate tracks. This is what makes numerology so persistent. Intellectual debunking doesn't reach the layer where the experience originates. You can't think your way out of a feeling that arrives before thought does. Every tradition that has tried to eliminate superstitious pattern matching through education alone has discovered this. The Roman philosopher Cicero wrote against divination in 44 BCE. 2,000 years of rational argument later, horoscope apps have millions of daily users. So the question shifts. Instead of asking whether numerology is real, a more useful question emerges. What is your pattern-seeking brain trying to tell you when it starts flagging numbers? Because the numbers themselves carry zero information. Your unconscious state at the moment of noticing carries all of it. The repeating sequences are a mirror. They reflect your current emotional frequency back to you, using the only language your deep survival brain speaks. Pattern, signal, meaning. Every time you notice a number and feel that whisper, your brain is telling you something about your own internal state. Uncertainty is high. A decision feels unresolved. You're scanning for guidance because the path forward is unclear. The number is irrelevant. The scan itself is the data. That sticky note with 37 is still on your desk if you tried the experiment. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a counter is already running.